I see at least two issues that need addressing. First, the term inverse, this is really interesting. The term inverse meritocracy implies a level of organization that I don't really believe exists. In other words, what I've seen from vegan activism online is simply a reflection of cultural and even political practices outside of it. Celebrity worshipping in lieu of organization and institutionalism. So I disagree with you here. This is what makes it interesting. In Canada, who spoke at the quote-unquote Nation Rising rally in Ottawa, Canada? Who spoke there and who was excluded? Right? I was in Canada for this event, for Nation Rising. I was emailing them more than a year before the event happened. I was talking about them and trying to talk with them and trying to talk to them. And Maud Vegan talked to them on my behalf. She was to some extent an insider and knew those people. Okay? I was excluded. I was silenced. And if I had participated and if they had heard my constructive criticism, everything about that event, both in the lead up and the press coverage afterwards and in what actually happened, could have been way more positive and more effective. They didn't want to hear it. They excluded me from day one. Who was there? James Aspey. It's the same dude, okay? That is formally, overtly organized. So no, it's not just people in bikinis on the internet. There are formal, explicit political organizations with funding from donors making these decisions. And they are making the decision, no, Aisling Mazard doesn't get to talk, doesn't even get to attend, doesn't even get to participate in a silent vigil. And James Aspey, he's the guy on stage speaking. They literally give him a platform. And one of the organizers, he was at first really offended when I reached out to him and shared my criticism of what had happened with Nation Rising. And you know what? He took the time, he watched the videos, and his messages to me, they got less and less angry. And then the last couple messages I've made were actually warm and appreciative. And he said, wow, you know what? I think you're doing something really important here in offering this kind of critique. He saw a lot of value in about the constructive criticism I was saying about what went wrong with Nation Rising. I understand why you'd say this. At a glance, you might think, oh no, there is no organization. There is no institutionalization. It's just a bunch of fame whores on YouTube trying to get clicks and views and trying to make money on Instagram. No, there is. There is formal political organization, just like direct action everywhere. And there's a bank account, and there's money involved, and there's a hierarchy. People are unequal. There are some people who make decisions and who put that money in their pocket and live off that donor money, including direct action everywhere. Shout out to Wayne Seong. And there are other people who do not and who can't scrutinize those people. There are real relationships of authority. There are real institutional hierarchies of this. And guess what? If you sign up and join a synagogue, synagogues are not grassroots democratic decentralized organizations either. Had a pretty big response within just 10 or 11 hours of the last video I put up. It's not the first video on my channel titled Stupidity is Real. And it's not the first video on my channel to offer criticism of figures like Paul Bashir, James Aspey. I think it is the first criticism of Moon and Rock, whom I hadn't even heard of before they quit being vegan. I wasn't even aware of their channel. Although in some ways they're similar to and represent common themes that have come up again and again in the movement. Now, obviously, many of the negative reactions were at a kind of shallow surface level to that video. But I did also get some deeper comments and criticism. So part of it was people feeling that Melissa didn't get a chance to talk. Melissa's with me here off camera. Yeah, it's true. Melissa didn't get a chance to talk. We were just chatting about that. It's true. And, you know, I think you guys may overlook the extent to which that was a spontaneous video made, as we said at the beginning with a disclaimer, with about 3 hours of sleep. We'd just gotten off the airplane and the train and arrived here in France. That's France in the background out the window, by the way. It is true. You know, Melissa has her own YouTube channel. Melissa makes her own videos. And there are some videos where we sit down on an equal footing to give a response to, for example, the book review videos we did together. When we did the book review video on American universities and what's wrong with them, a few different book reviews, a few different discussions we've had where we both start off on an equal footing. Then Melissa gets closer to equal time on the video. In that case, I sat down with a pretty simple thesis, which was to talk about stupidity as being a real factor. And I mean, you were just asking me about this. It's kind of stupidity as something different from morality or ideology. It's apart from being right or wrong or a specific tactical choice made by these people. They said, look, stupidity is a real factor here. People overlook it, and it also has an impact on people like me and my decision to quit the movement in my current situation. So I started recording with really that thesis in mind. And it is true, I was not really interested in Melissa kind of taking the conversation down other roads. And, right at the start of the video, this is one of the reasons why people have reacted so negatively to the video. Other reasons were stated within the video. People don't want to hear what I have to say, and I understand that. Like, I really understand how much more popular this channel would be if I'd come up from day one saying, wow, what Freely and Durian Rider are doing is just great. And if today I was saying, wow, what James Aspey has been doing is just great, and lots of love and support to him and the whole crew, and I was so excited to see him on the new channel called Dubu from Sean Lee. And I remember Sean Lee from back when he supported Durian Rider and Freely, and that's also great. Like, if I was doing the cheerleading at every stage consistently, and if I was doing the cheerleading now, and obviously some of the cheerleading would be sincere. I mentioned in that video also the people, the activists I do support and I do respect and admire. I have respect for what PCRM has done and what Neil Bernard has done. A lot of people pointed that out in the comment section in response to the complaint, like, oh, you regard all other vegan activists negatively. Well, I'm not here to lie to you. Well, okay, another big example. One of the longest playlists on this channel is the criticism of DXE. So DXE is the initialization of direct action everywhere. Imagine how differently this whole channel would be perceived and how my whole career would be different if I had just come up being, well, here's the latest project from DXE and that's great and I'm so happy they're doing this. We could have done the whole channel that way, from start to finish. And it could have been a natural vegan is great, and vegan cheetah is great, and happy healthy vegan is great. I could have just been giving out completely false positive indications on all the other YouTube channels and actual organizations, institutions in the movement. And you can ask yourself as a thought exercise how much larger and more positive the response from the audience would be. But I came into this, I keep making the comparison to Buddhism, and some of you guys may not know what Buddhism has meant in my life. I am not a Buddhist because I don't want to live a lie. Hey, look, shout out to Mexi and Marnie, privileged vegan, and their podcast is called The Vegan Vanguard. They have a much bigger audience as tankies. Now, if you don't know what tanky means, it is a word for a communist apologist or communist supporter. Do you guys have any doubt in your mind that I would have a bigger audience and more money coming in and more support if I just came out here and was a stereotypical pro-left-wing tanky? I think the size of their audience is a good indication, which is it's not enormous. They're not like PewDiePie or something. They're not pulling in millions. But there's a big, big audience of people who don't want their opinions challenged and just want positivity, just want to hear reiterated and repeated what they already know and already agree with on the far left wing. And I don't do that either. I mean, if you consider Bernie Sanders left wing, I don't really think of Bernie Sanders as left wing. I'm definitely left of center in terms of current American political discourse. There's no way I could be a member of the Republican Party in 2018. But I'm not a stereotypical leftist, and I have a lot of criticism directed left wing also. So look. You know what the truth is? I just said this in some email to some people, in some Facebook conversations. I actually see it as really positive that people got offended by my last video. Because in my last video, Stupidity is Real, I was saying things that I've said 5 times before, to be reasonable. Not 100 times. Let's say I've said it 5 times before. I've criticized James Aspey before. I've criticized Gary Yourofsky before. And it's really positive if you can present that message, and then the 5th time, people are still finding it fresh and provocative and offensive rather than responding to it with indifference. It's surprising to me because I've said all that stuff before. And, a lot of the questions reflect the fact that people are coming to my channel for the first time. So this legit just comes up in the email I'm going to answer. People were asking, have you done Cube of Truth? Have you done Slaughterhouse Vigils? So talking about Slaughterhouse Vigils, that's like 4 years ago on this channel. There's a really good video. In my opinion, it's still really good. Called The Agony of Activism. And that was the first in-depth discussion of what it's like sitting and witnessing a pig having its throat slit and cows and chickens and other animals being killed in front of you. What does that mean for the movement? And what does that mean for you as an activist? And what does it mean in terms of my own story and getting engaged? And there was a whole series of videos about my engagement with the various vigils. So Cube of Truth and their competitor, the Earthlings Experience. And there's the organization that started it all before them. These two young British women in London. Their organization was called London Vegan Actions. They actually invented that. It wasn't Paul Bashir wearing the white mask and doing the salvage. So all that's been covered on this channel, and my attempts to volunteer with them and my experience doing street activism, that's all been covered. So I understand people coming on and self-righteously saying like, oh, well, when did you ever do this? But it's like, yeah, I've been there, I've seen it all, I've done it all, and I've had 1,000 videos on this channel talking about it. So obviously you can't expect your audience to be there with you. But like I feel the sincerity of those responses. And all I can say is I'm happy you came to my channel and saw that video and got stimulated enough to start asking some of those questions. So I got an email here from a guy named Lamar. By default, I just answer email and questions on Patreon by calling people by their first name. So shout out to Lamar, unless they tell me they want me to use their full name or they want me to shout out their YouTube channel or promote their Facebook or something. Then I'll use that name or give that link. And I just mentioned I have slightly shortened his email, and actually the stuff I deleted were statements agreeing with me. I understand why he did that. To make the criticism kind of less offensive, he says, look, I agree with you about X, Y, and Z. However, and I've normally deleted the first part and I start with the however, because for the purpose of this video, I don't want to repeat him agreeing with me or him reassuring me that he does see some value in what I'm doing on the channel. So this is chopped down a little bit. So he writes, greetings, Eisel, first-time correspondent here. I write this because you are one of the few figures that I'm remotely interested in paying attention to when it comes to veganism. Preach. So I cut off Melissa on this. You guys can tell Melissa's just off camera. But, one of the few things I didn't like in the last videos, Melissa started saying, oh, well, you get so many fewer viewers and your videos are actually substantive and these other videos not substantive. I didn't like the way that changed the tone of the video. I didn't want to make it into a competition that comes up here in Lamar's question. But look, I'm a producer of content and I'm a consumer. And Lamar just saying this. Do you think there's a lot of content for me to watch on YouTube? There's shockingly little under any heading. There's shockingly little in veganism I'm interested in listening to or hearing. Like, do you think we can sit around and watch Supreme Banana? Do you think we can sit around and watch Unnatural Vegan? Like, if Melissa and I sit and watch basically any vegan YouTube channel other than my own, we're just sitting there heaping scorn on it or like face palming, like spending the whole time like, oh my God, this is so stupid. This is so out of touch. And you guys know I have videos saying this. That also applies to the like self-styled intellectuals, the people with PhDs, the people with formal credentials. I can't like sit and enjoy, the latest lecture from Gary Yourofsky talking about pet ownership or something. I have some respect for those people in the movement. That's why my criticisms of them are longer and in more depth. But no, it's facepalm city around here. Yeah. Anyway, so we agree with this, and I really feel it, where he says, look, you're one of the only people in the vegan movement I have any interest in paying attention to. And he continues, quote, while I would be disappointed if you quit, I'm not going to directly try to convince you to not quit. But I would like to ask you to consider some questions before you do quit. Consider this in the same light as you do the criticism on your own channel. As you put it, quote, the role of this channel within veganism has been to challenge the unquestioned assumptions people were living by. So he then quotes me, quote, we live in an era of inverse meritocracy. The stupidest people are promoted to positions at the pinnacle of fame and influence in the vegan movement. And that's one of the main reasons why I want out. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to compete at the bottom of the pile, close quote. So here he asks an interesting question. 1. What are you defining as merit? By your use of the term inverse meritocracy, you imply that you have more merit than people like James Aspey, Paul Bashir, Gary Yourofsky, Earthling Ed, and others you criticize in your channel. Specifically say how this is so. According to my own definition, I would say that you do have more merit, like from his perspective, but I want to hear or read your definition and not just, statements about kind of who's stupid and who's not, right? So look, I don't see, the merit that it takes to advance the vegan movement as one thing, as a single criterion that there's only one right way to do it. I actually do think there's a lot of room for diversity of approaches and methods and tactics. But there are different things we can point to as, signaling that there is this kind of underlying merit. I've asked people for the whole 5 years I've been on this channel, what are you planning to do for the next 5 years? Where do you think you're going to be 5 years from now? Where is the movement going? Where are you going? In your methods and your approach, and your activism. And I think every single time, I think 100% of the time, people have not had an answer. People have some of them have been shocked. Some of them have just been a little surprised. Some of them found it interesting. But I don't think I talked to anyone who was like answering, oh yeah, right, well this is what we're doing in the next 5 years and this is why I'm doing this. Probably if I were interviewing restaurant owners, probably if I was interviewing people who were just doing the business side of veganism, they'd have a 5-year plan and more of a clear-headed approach that way. But people, including really intelligent people, I had a guy who was more like a human rights lawyer. I think technically he did law, ecology law, so environmental rights law. Even he had no answer to that question. And he sent me an email a few months ago saying, wow, now when I look back, the fact that you asked me that question, and it's almost 5 years ago, you asked me, maybe it only been 3 years, but whatever. What are you doing in the next 5 years? Think about the next 5 years and where you're going in your activism, where both of us are going to be from 5 years from now and stuff. He says, wow, now I really look back on that, and I rue the day sort of thing. Sure, when you look at the extreme short-term thinking, and to be blunt, fame whoring of people like James Aspey, of even the way something like PETA operates, in my opinion. Not everything PETA does is bad. You could put in exceptions here. But a lot of this stuff is just kind of chasing headlines, chasing short-term fame, this kind of short-term thinking. I do think that the kind of merit we're talking about here in terms of building the vegan movement, it is going to be signaled by genuine long-term thinking and planning with positive aspirations, some kind of positive aspiration to make the world a better place is going to be at play there. And I think once you have that, you're going to have positive cooperation with others toward that goal. And by the way, I do think it's legitimate that many people with a 5-year plan would exclude me for legitimate reasons. So I don't think PCRM would be interested in working with me. They're basically only interested in working with other medical doctors and scientific researchers. Probably they have a small role for legal experts, legal analysts, or that kind of thing. They have a really specialized type of lobbying they're doing. Somebody else, to give you an example, I do not know anyone doing this. This is an excellent form of vegan advocacy. Let's say you had a 5-year plan to really take on the issue of the rights of slaughterhouse workers, to do a labor union approach, where you say, look, the exploitation of people in the slaughterhouses is terrible, and we're going to do this partly to shine a critical light on the whole industry, the questions of the slaughter of the animals also, but we're going to really take the angle of saying, look at how many of these people have PTSD and their lives are destroyed and they're horribly exploited. And somebody taking that approach, they might only be interested in other people with a background in labor disputes, labor law, this kind of struggle, unionization and factory workers' rights and that kind of thing. So I don't know anyone doing that, but that's obviously a very rich approach. I've said many times this channel, there's an opportunity to have an approach that's just based on leather and leather advocacy. And I'm interested now, even, what about an approach that's based on children's entertainment, on storybooks and cartoons and fables? So there are different specific modes and tactics, but once you've got that, once you've got a positive aspiration and a 5-year plan, or a 5-year set of hopes at least, then you're gonna have other merits that are attached to that reflect the sincerity of your engagement, your openness to working with other people who can support you and whom you can support. So look, it's a great question. What is merit in this reverse meritocracy I'm talking about? So to give a very broad and inclusive answer, trying to achieve something positive in the movement in a 5-year time span, not a 1,000-year time span, not talking about some super broad thing. I think that's one reasonable criterion to bring to bear here. And yeah, I do think, we had a lot of comments that were offended by my talking about people being drug addicts. I think that's a significant factor here. I think the fact that people are just coping with recovery from drug addiction and sharing that story, I think that is part of the short-term thinking here. It's one factor among many, apart from just fame whoring, apart from just trying to make money out of vacation videos, of going on vacation, and then making a social media product out of the videotape of you swimming on the beach on a tropical island. James Aspey does this heavily, and he's not the only one. I mean, there are a lot of other factors here that, as I say, are the opposite of merit in this situation. So yeah, when you're asking about merit, look, it's very easy for me to imagine a positive version of pretty much every institution and organization I criticize. Like, so Melissa, you participated in a bunch of the videos criticizing Direct Action Everywhere, DXE. If I put it to you as a thought experiment, what would a parallel universe look like in which we both supported DXE? How different would that organization have to be? The honest answer is, it's not that different. The changes are fundamental. The differences are fundamental, and that's why they're not going to happen, and that's why it's worth criticizing. But it's not that different. PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. All vegans hate PETA. We all love to hate on PETA. But if you ask yourself as a thought experiment, how different would PETA be for you to approve it? You can make a checklist. It's attainable. It's not that hard. Or even for me to be a member of PETA. I don't think they'd have me, but if I could join PETA. And again, when my clash with Joey Carbstrong over Cube of Truth, I said to him straight up, repeatedly, directly to him and in the videos, look, the criticisms I have of Cube of Truth, you could change this stuff within the next 2 months. These are practical changes you could make. This is attainable change. So it's not that big a gap, even for the groups I've criticized most harshly and at the most length. Okay, so we continue with this email from Lamar. I see at least 2 issues that need addressing. First, the term inverse, this is really interesting. The term inverse meritocracy implies a level of organization that I don't really believe exists. Okay? In other words, what I've seen from vegan activism online is simply a reflection of cultural and even political practices outside of it. Celebrity worshiping in lieu of organization and institutionalism. So I disagree with you here. This is what makes it interesting. In Canada, who spoke at the quote-unquote Nation Rising rally in Ottawa, Canada? Who spoke there and who was excluded? Right? I was in Canada for this event, for Nation Rising. I was emailing them more than a year before the event happened. I was talking about them and trying to talk with them and trying to talk to them. And Maud Vegan talked to them on my behalf. She was to some extent an insider and knew those people. Okay? I was excluded. I was silenced. And if I had participated and if they had heard my constructive criticism, everything about that event, both in the lead up and the press coverage afterwards and in what actually happened, could have been way more positive and more effective. They didn't want to hear it. They excluded me from day one. Who was there? James Aspey. It's the same dude, okay? That is formally, overtly organized. So no, it's not just people in bikinis on the internet. There are formal, explicit political organizations with funding from donors making these decisions. And they are making the decision, no, Aysel Mazard doesn't get to talk, doesn't even get to attend, doesn't even get to participate in a silent vigil. And James Aspey, he's the guy on stage speaking. They literally give him a platform. And they ask for donations, and they keep that money, and they spend that money, and they get endorsements. In the case of Nation Rising, they get endorsements from other agencies. In their case, they got backing from the pig slaughter group, the vigil movement, whatever they call it, the silent vigils at pig slaughterhouses and cow slaughters. They reached out to and got endorsements from all these different agencies, and their event was a flop. It was a failure. And one of the organizers, he was at first really offended when I reached out to him and shared my criticism of what had happened with Nation Rising. And you know what? He took the time, he watched the videos, and his messages to me, they got less and less angry. And then the last couple messages I were actually warm and appreciative. And he said, wow, you know what? I think you're doing something really important here in offering this kind of critique. He saw a lot of value in the end about the constructive criticism I was saying about what went wrong with Nation Rising. And there was also a tendency in his first response he was a part of to just lie and pretend it was a success. To just lie and say, oh no, thousands of people attended. It was a huge success. No, it wasn't. It was a failure. And I would also say specifically James Aspey's involvement with it was a failure. So this is what's interesting to me is no, I understand why you'd say this. At a glance, you might think, oh no, there is no organization. There is no institutionalization. It's just a bunch of fame whores on YouTube trying to get clicks and views. and trying to make money on Instagram. No, there is. There is formal political organization, just like direct action everywhere. And there's a bank account, and there's money involved, and there's a hierarchy. People are unequal. There are some people who make decisions and who put that money in their pocket and live off that donor money, including direct action everywhere. Shout out to Wayne Xiong. And there are other people who do not and who can't scrutinize those people. There are real relationships of authority. There are real institutional hierarchies of this. And guess what? If you sign up and join a synagogue, synagogues are not grassroots, democratic, decentralized organizations either. They're also formally institutionalized, organized, etc. Okay, don't worry, this isn't too much longer, but to me, this is an interesting. And again, it is a critique. He is criticizing me and challenging me, but that challenge is appreciated. So he says, the focus is less on institution building than it is on online slacktivism that allows most people to give money to allows the people to give money to celebrity activists that can then do the activism for them. Right, so that is one factor, but I would say there's more money in institutionalizing, and that's why people do it. And that's why Earthling Ed did it. Earthling Ed graduated from slacktivism to institution building. Look at someone like Henia Mania. She would have been better off if she had. But sure, this comment, it applies to many scenarios, but not all. Obviously, a lot of this criticism I just agree with, or it's not true 100% of the time, but it's true a large percent of the time. Sure. Second, how can quitting veganism be reconciled, or quitting the vegan movement? Of course I'm going to keep eating a vegan diet. What do you think? You guys think I'm going to go start eating organ meat? Some crap. Anyway, how can quitting the movement be reconciled with the foundation of your conception of veganism, one that has an intense desire for community? The way you speak of the connection between your veganism and a sense of community even possesses moral connotations. In your video on community, it's the title of the video, you say, quote, I have no reason to pretend that veganism is completely satisfactory to me if it is just a diet or it's something I do in private and that can't have any political ramifications, close quote. How would your quitting fundamentally change your veganism? This would be a very useful topic for a video, by the way. If you still want the sense of community that you discussed in your manifesto, what exactly are you saying if you stop engaging with the activities that facilitate it? Right. So look, this is a criticism. Basically, all I can do is agree and say it's really sad. I'm just going to contrast this to a different criticism I received. Several people wrote in telling me, you would never be satisfied with anything. Nothing is good enough for you. Like, you're quitting the movement, but no movement could have satisfied you. I completely disagree with that. So I do largely agree with what this guy is saying here with the criticism from, sorry, I'm forgetting his name, the criticism from Lamar. But if I had 5 people I could cooperate with, I'd be happy. When I had the money to host a conference in Vancouver, Canada, and Vancouver is a huge city for veganism and vegan activism, if I had 10 people saying, yes, I want to join in, I want to deliver a paper, I want to make this happen, I want to help, I want to be positive, I'm happy. That is not, after whatever was that point, 4 years in the movement, that is not too much to ask. You've been through what I've been through in this movement, and you come back to Canada and say, hey, I want to organize like a small academic style conference. This is not a street protest. This is not something for thousands of people to attend. It's something for a few dozen people to attend. Say, hey, I want to organize people, and I wanted us to deliver papers. The topic of the conference was actually pragmatism. What really does pragmatism mean? And challenging some of the voices who think pragmatism means reducitarianism, and saying, kind of reclaiming, fighting for intellectually and politically and ultimately organizationally the concept of a vegan pragmatism, a principled pragmatism, and what that now means, and to some extent what the research and hard facts say. I didn't have one person, not one. And this includes all the people with PhDs and law degrees and stuff, not one person. So it's not the case that nothing would have satisfied me or I had unattainable goals. If I had 5 people, if I had 10 people, great. And again, I could say the same about Buddhism. If I knew 10 scholars in Buddhism who were worth it, it doesn't have to be scholars. If I knew 10 people doing humanitarian work, I cared a lot about humanitarian work in my life. If I knew 10 people doing real, sincere work, I'd still be a Buddhist today, and I'd still be, those 10 people would be my best friends now for 10 years or whatever, you know what I mean? We all would have done together. What I said in that movement was, I don't want to be a one-man religion, so I had to quit Buddhism. I don't want to be a one-man political protest. I don't want to be a one-man organization. So to answer this directly, Lamar asks, what would it mean if you stop engaging in what would it mean if you stop engaging in activities that would facilitate vegan community? It means I accept that I'm totally alone, and I'm walking away alone and with nothing, as I even said in the earlier video. So that's sad, but I mean, every other trip we made to Europe, so the last one 6 months ago, every trip we made everywhere, when we went to Los Angeles and everything, I was really putting out as many emails and announcements on YouTube and everything I could, saying, hey, we're going to Los Angeles. What can we participate in? Like, what protests can I show up to? Like, what street protest or what activism or what outreach? What other vegan activists can I meet? Who can I cooperate with? Whether it's making a YouTube video or something more positive or meaningful. I did that everywhere in the world. And obviously including places like Seattle and Vancouver, Bangkok, Chiang Mai, Paris. It's been a long, strange list of places. I'm probably forgetting a few. And guys, nothing positive came back, and now it's over. People closed the door against me so many times, and after a certain point, you say, okay, the door is closed, moving on. Okay, from what I've seen, so he continues, why not establish your own institution with much better organization, superior values, and effective methods? This is where I assume you will say, quote, no one is willing to cooperate with me. I would argue that this needs to be fleshed out more. Who did you seek cooperation with and why? So look, one of the reasons I don't talk about that more specifically is just privacy. So he suggests in his full email that I should make more videos talking about that. Well, there's already a lot of complaining on this channel. And for me to come out and be like, look, Mod Vegan is a piece of shit. I tried to get something organized with Mod Vegan for so long, and this is a response, and she let me down, and now I can't work with her. Like, you really think this channel would be better, the discourse better, if it was coming out and naming and shaming all the people I've tried to cooperate with? Or even, in some cases, it's just emails that never got answered once. So I just talked about the group Nation Rising, who froze me out and excluded me. I did also make videos talking about the Cube of Truth people, aka Anonymous for the Voiceless, who actively scorned me, excluded me, didn't even let me participate in a silent protest. And they do allow people as offensive as Vegan Gains and Isaac from Ask Yourself. Those guys, were reached out to or included to some extent. Paul Bashir was willing to hear criticism from those guys and not me. Well, we all know why. There's good reason. I utterly despise their reasons, but I know and understand the reasons why they exclude me. I know why they're afraid. I know what they're afraid of. So some of that stuff has been talked about on the channel, but no, you're not going to get more content talking about my disappointment with particular activists or particular people. That would be a kind of a naming and shaming thing. But yeah, at this point, I can say I reached out to everybody, obviously, especially in Canada. There's no point in my reaching out to someone in the United Kingdom, in England, that I can't participate with. But even that having been said, I'm now remembering all the examples of people in England, especially England and Ireland, a couple in Scotland, where there was at least the possibility of cooperation over Skype, and through YouTube on that level. But in terms of really getting organized, obviously it's got to be Canada or parts of the United States that are adjacent to Canada, like Seattle, and we went to Los Angeles and so on. So no, I understand. Anyway, he says he doesn't know who I've reached out to. It's true. But, it's both. It's who I've reached out to and it's who's reached out to me. And he went on to say, maybe I'll skip this part. He says, it's quite correct. He says, look, you really tried hard even to have a working relationship with Vegan Cheetah. You're damn right. I worked really hard to have a relationship with Vegan Cheetah, with Henya of Henya Mania, with Jason Pizzino, with all kinds of people who were really at the shallow lifestyle activism, bikinis and permanent vacation style activism. I made tons of positive effort with people, where I find fault in what they're doing on YouTube or with what they're doing at the time. And again, it comes back to the same thing with my critique of Cube of Truth and Direct Action Everywhere. It wouldn't be that hard for these people to reform what they're doing, or for these institutions to reform what they're doing. All right. So again, I still think this is interesting. This is his point 2, as he numbered it. Point 2, quote, also, what do you mean when you say you are competing at the bottom of the pile? Who are you competing with? What are you competing for? And just to summarize, he goes on to say that he doesn't believe we should be competing for fame and influence. He doesn't believe we should be competing for the number of viewers. So this is also why I didn't like Melissa's brief comment in my former video where she was... I totally sympathize with why she said it, and I know it's sincere, and I'm basically in favor of anyone saying sincere crap on YouTube, where Melissa was saying like, oh, well, it doesn't make sense that these videos that are just about nothing have so many more views than videos on your channel, Eisel, that are substantive. I feel Melissa's sincerity, and this is something we both live with. However, the other side of that is, of course, fluff and nonsense has more viewers. How many viewers can you possibly get for a video talking about philosophy of Aristotle? How many viewers can you possibly get? A really good example for a book review about Gary Francione and his philosophy of animal rights and critique of animal rights. You're right. I mean, it's really substantive content, and it's really important to veganism and the movement. But for me, I completely understand why. I mean, like a girl jumping up and down in a bikini after drinking a fruit smoothie gets more views than that. Like, I'm not in a position to complain. If you think of this in terms of competing for audience size, like, you kind of have to accept going into this, the numbers are always going to be on the side of garbage, of absolute garbage. And in a sense, that's okay. So, but I'm going to answer directly this question. What are you competing for? And what are you competing with? I'm competing for those 5 people. I'm competing for those 10 people. I'm competing for a small audience of support of people who could actually work with me to build an institution, to build a future movement. And to scale it up a little bit, I would say I'm competing for maybe 2,000 people who would support my publishing a children's storybook. Maybe it's 2,000, maybe it's 5,000. So again, not big numbers, not the 9.2 million people who watched the Nina and Randa video, the Lick My Body Challenge. I don't think those are 9.2 million people who are supporting veganism. But sure, whether it's 2,000 people or 5,000 people who would support me publishing a children's storybook, if we had done that academic style conference on veganism and pragmatism, how many people would have needed support? 100, 200? So yeah, there still is something I'm competing for. Although you're correct, to use his terms, I am not competing for a meteoric rise to fame and influence. All right. So he goes on to say, from my perspective, you quitting deprives veganism of an opportunity to most effectively institution build. And he again says that he wants me to get specific about what kind of cooperation I've been seeking and who has been refusing to cooperate with me. This video is as specific as it's going to get, Lamar. But I have been very open-minded. I mean, keep in mind, this channel has included the possibility of people cooperating with me in vegan baking. I mean, we've covered a huge range. It's not just street activism. It's not just lobbying City Hall. There's been a huge range of possible forms of cooperation. Okay. He closes by saying at some length that he really doesn't want me to quit and asks what quitting will mean. Stay tuned. You're going to see how the channel will change. And he says, I think you would be making a mistake, even in your own terms, by quitting vegan activism. Well, I'm a 40-year-old man with a 5-year-old daughter. I have other commitments in life. And in many ways, I had already quit at the time Durian Rider created this controversy that forced me into the courtroom and forced me to double down my efforts on YouTube just to clear my own name. If that hadn't happened with Durian Rider, it's really possible I would have quit much sooner because I was in a full-time language program in China, struggling to learn Chinese and doing other things. These 5 years have been a remarkable opportunity in my life and in some ways a remarkable period of time for the vegan movement because I was in university in Canada and then I was in an education program in China and I was doing other things. But no, not only do I feel that quitting is the right thing for me, at this point, I feel I really have no alternative. Even if YouTube is now to become not a smaller, but an even bigger part of my life. If you guys check out the front page of my Patreon, link in the description, you're going to see there are no promises about vegan activism. I'm not doing any of the dishonest, manipulative things that other vegan YouTubers do. I'm not saying if you donate $10, I will convert 2 new people to veganism. If you've watched this channel a long time, I used to criticize other vegans who had this kind of thing. I'm not saying if you pay me enough money, I'll go out and write chalk on the sidewalk, chalktivism. There's another channel who did that. If you pay me money, I'll go out and do this, that, and the other form of activism. There is no lie of that kind. There's a straight up statement that, look, I'm someone with a background in political philosophy, political science, Asian studies, Asian languages, and I'm coming on YouTube to share what it is I've got to give. And at some point, after 1,000 videos, what I've got to share and what I've got to give no longer is complaining about the hopelessness of the vegan movement. It's internalizing that hopelessness, learning the lesson, and moving on.